If you're planning your first Camino, you might be a little bit worried, a little bit anxious, and there are some very common fears for those walking their first Camino, and that's what we're going to be talking about this week. Okay, we are shooting this on the 1st of June 2021, so we've been kind of dealing with COVID for over a year now, and things are looking like it's starting to open up in Spain a little bit, and all the chatter online is people about planning their Caminos, either they've walked Caminos in the past and they're so eager to get back, or people who are eager to walk their first Camino. Particularly if you're thinking of walking your first Camino, it can be a bit of an anxious time, and you can be a little bit worried, and you could be wondering, am I doing the right thing, and what could happen? And so this week I'd like to talk about 8 common fears of people walking the Camino. So I walked my first Camino in 2015, and I was a little bit anxious. I mean, it's quite a big undertaking. My first Camino was on the Camino Frances, and I walked from Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port to Santiago, 800 Ks. I had done quite a bit of research and reading online, so I kind of knew what to expect. But even then, anxiety is fairly usual. So let me run through what I think are probably 8 common fears. And if you have any others, by all means, comment down below. And for the old hands at Caminos, I'm sure you'll have lots of advice that you can share down below as well. So in no particular order. I should preface, before I get into the 8 fears, you'll probably find videos on this channel about all 8 of these, if you want to get into a little bit more detail. So number 1, I reckon number 1 for a lot of people is, I'll be alone. I don't want to walk on my own. I'm scared to be on my own in a foreign country and walking on my own through the countryside. So let me allay your fears on that one. And I will say that for people walking their first Camino, it's not a bad idea to walk one of the more popular routes. If you're not aware, there are probably 20 plus different Camino routes from all over Europe heading towards Santiago de Compostela. Within Spain, there's at least a dozen. So the most common ones are the Camino Frances, which starts in southern France and goes right across northern Spain. Another very common and popular one is the Camino Portuguese, which comes up through Portugal. So those are the 2 most popular ones. And if you're walking those, it's pretty unlikely you're going to be alone very much. And people like those for a first Camino because you have a sense of community. There'll be quite a few people that you'll meet along the way. Also, all of the villages that you pass through, I mean, they've been hosting pilgrims for over 1,000 years. So, lots of friendly locals as well. And so you're really not going to feel alone. I have to say, on my first Camino, I actually loved the periods during, which I was alone. I mean, it's pretty hard to be alone, certainly in the popular months on something like the Camino Frances, because it's, a lot of people. But there would be hours each day where, if I was lucky, I would have some alone time, and I thought that was really cool. But, in the evenings as I'm coming to the villages, you recognise all the other pilgrims. The locals don't walk around in hiking gear with backpacks. So there's, pilgrims everywhere, and you soon make friends. So I honestly would not worry about being alone, even if you're a fairly sort of anxious person. And you might be thinking, oh, maybe I'll go with someone. I've got a video on that too. Have a look on the channel. It's not always a great idea to bring someone with you, because someone who might be a best friend at home, or a family member at home, walking a Camino together is a very different experience, and you could get on each other's nerves and fall out. I've seen lots of friends fall out on the Camino. They thought it was a great idea, to walk with their best friend. Not always. So on the topic of being alone, I wouldn't get too anxious about it. You're going to meet lots of other really nice people, great locals. Maybe your biggest fear is actually kind of getting there on your own, the actual travel. But again, it's an adventure. There's not a lot can go wrong. You might be flying in from another country, you might be getting trains. Just plan how you're going to get there. And you're going to meet lots of really cool people as soon as you get there. So I really wouldn't worry too much about the loneliness. I actually find that's a real positive because it's so much of an adventure being on your own, and you can kind of do whatever you like. You don't have to worry about other people's preferences that have come along with you. So on the most popular routes, Camino Frances, Camino Portuguese, you're really not going to be alone very much. Number 2, hopefully people aren't worried about this, but I know some people are concerned about it because of the questions they ask online, and that is, can I get lost? It's pretty hard. On my first Camino, I got lost for about 10 minutes. I just took a wrong turn in a village, and I probably went about 500 metres out of my way. On my second Camino, my wife missed one of the signs and probably went off a K down a road without me, but she came back. She was on the phone. So it's pretty hard to get lost, particularly on the popular routes like the Camino Frances and the Camino Portuguese. Why is it hard to get lost? Well, you're basically following arrows. So my experience is on the Camino Frances, and literally you become very adept. Every time you come to a junction or a turning, before you kind of go through that junction, you're having a little scan around, and there's always going to be a yellow arrow somewhere or a sign. It might be down on the footpath or on a tree. There's signs everywhere, and like within the first day, it just becomes habit to cast around, and you'll just notice the arrows and you follow the arrows. A lot of people carry a guidebook. You don't really need a guidebook, but it's handy to know what villages are coming up and how far you've got to walk and that kind of thing. A lot of people use apps. I like to use Google Maps when I'm walking, not because I'm going to get lost, but because it kind of keeps my brain active. I think, how many Ks till the next village? It's 7 Ks, and then I'll be walking along, and I think, I'm probably walking at 4 Ks an hour, so I'll be there in about 2.5 hours, and I might stop for a coffee. So, that's what I tend to use apps for. But are you going to get lost? It's pretty hard to get lost, to be honest. You're just following signs. The third fear or anxiety that people might have is probably around clothing and equipment. Now, you'll get a lot of talk online about, boots and clothing and wet weather gear. I'm a bit of a gear junkie. People love to compare gear and what's the lightest weight gear they can get and all the rest of it. You do not need any special gear. You could walk really in stuff that you can bring from home. The most important item of equipment is going to be your footwear. And there are so many options. Some people like to wear boots or shoes or sandals or trail runners. So just do a little bit of research, get some really comfortable footwear. That's the most vital bit of gear that you're going to take. Everything else, you can kind of make do. You're going to need some kind of rain protection. You can get very inexpensive ponchos. You're going to need a backpack of some sort to carry your gear. But you do not need special gear. You do not need to spend a fortune on gear. Okay, so that's the third fear. Number 4, fitness. I've definitely got some videos on the channel about fitness. I fooled myself on my first Camino. I thought, I'm going to lose weight and I'm going to get fit, and I didn't. And I turned up very unfit and overweight. And in fact, I have walked 3 Caminos so far, twice from Saint-Jean and the last couple of 100 Ks on the Camino Frances for another one. All 3, I have been unfit and overweight. Am I proud of that? No. Did I manage? Yes. But it increased the level of discomfort. So I wouldn't stress about fitness, but it's common sense to, if you're vastly overweight like I was BMI 33, I think, on my first Camino. It doesn't make a lot of sense to be that heavy. You're damaging your joints and so on. So if you can lose a little bit of weight, makes sense. Do you have to? No. Fat people walk the Camino. I did. But it helps if you're not too heavy. Do you need to be super fit? No, I wasn't. But it helps if your fitness is a little bit better. So I started doing a little bit of training. I didn't really do enough. So you don't have to train hard. Just get out and walk and, start moving a bit every day. Just get used to walking and doing some gentle exercise, maybe some core exercises. You don't have to, but it's going to make things more comfortable for you. Number 5 is safety. I know a lot of people worry about safety, and females particularly. Will it be safe? I'm walking through the countryside on my own. Look, I suppose the easiest advice to give, and this is commonly the advice that's given, is that it's probably just as safe as where you live at home, if not safer. So is it 100% safe? Well, nowhere is. So take normal sort of personal safety precautions. Be aware of your surroundings. If you're worried walking on your own, buddy up with someone. There's lots of people to do that with. Just be sensible and take normal precautions. But you'll find it's a really nice community that you're walking with and through, and you're going to feel pretty safe, to be honest. Just take normal precautions. Number 6, people very often will worry about, where will I sleep? And so the ones who are a little bit anxious, what they do is they'll book all their accommodation before they go. So regardless of how far they're walking, it might be the last 100 kilometres from Sarria, so they might be booking 5 or 6 nights accommodation. Or I've met people who booked all of their accommodation from Saint-Jean, so maybe 35 to 40 days accommodation. I generally advise not to do that, because you're locking yourself into a schedule that within a few days is probably not going to suit you. And the reason I say that is that particularly on your first Camino, you're really not sure how comfortable you're going to be walking distances every day. You might want to, for example, have planned to walk 25 kilometres a day, but actually you're more comfortable walking 20. But now you have to push yourself 25 because you've booked your accommodation. Or conversely, you might have planned on 20, but whoa, you're having a great time and you're feeling fit and you're walking 30 a day. So you're going to be out of sync with all of your accommodation bookings. And so I think generally what most people find is that if you're concerned about accommodation, by all means book the first few nights, but after that kind of freewheel a little bit. So what do? I generally stay in private accommodation, which is a bit different to albergues, and I'll book maybe 1 or 2 nights ahead, because I'm a very slow walker. I'll arrive late in the day and I don't want to have to be thinking about, am I going to be able to find a bed? So once I'm into my routine, I kind of know which villages I'm aiming for, and I'll maybe book the night before for the next night. If you're staying in albergues, a lot of albergue types you can't book, the municipal albergues, for example, and they tend to sort of open up, I think, about 2 p.m. So people will generally try and arrive by 2 p.m. And they'll just kind of wait for the place to open, and there's a strict sort of protocol. People kind of check in the sequence that they arrived and so on. If you're in a particularly busy period, or sometimes you can be in what's called a wave of pilgrims, so it's a little bit like traffic jams on a highway. Sometimes for no reason the traffic sort of builds up and there's a lot more traffic, and then a few miles down the road there's like no traffic, and what happened? The same thing can happen on the Caminos, particularly the popular ones like the Camino Frances. So you can find yourself in a little bit of a bubble or a wave where there's just suddenly lots and lots of pilgrims around you, and you might be concerned about, will I find a bed? First of all, if you are in a bit of a bubble of pilgrims and you want to get out of it, some very simple tips are: leave later in the morning, stay an extra day somewhere, leave earlier in the morning, walk a shorter distance. Don't stay at the obvious end of stage villages. The accommodation there is always under a little bit more pressure, so stay in the smaller villages. People follow the guidebooks a lot, so there's a couple of guidebooks up there. It's natural. The guidebook is broken into stages because you can't put the whole thing on a page. And generally the guidebooks show each stage as being roughly a day's walk, and people then sort of get in their heads, I'll go to Puente Lorena, I'll go to Estella, and everyone's thinking the same. So everyone tends to end up, particularly on the Camino Frances, staying in the same towns. To break that rhythm and to get out of the crowd a bit, all you've got to do is stay in some of the smaller villages in between the major towns. If you should be faced with a situation where you come into a village and you're looking for a bed for the night and, the village is fully booked, there's always ways around it. Accommodation hosts may be able to suggest other places for you to stay. A very common way around that is just to jump in a taxi, go back a village, go forward a village or whatever, and you'll find some accommodation. So don't stress about it. You're not going to be sleeping on the porch of a church or under a tree. There will always be somewhere to sleep, or you'll be able to quite easily, get some transport to another place, slightly off the Camino or something like that. You're always going to find a bed. If you're particularly worried about it, book one night ahead so that you have that level of comfort. Number 7, a fear is, will I get injured? Okay, I'll be honest with you. Probably. It's pretty hard, depending on the length of Camino you're walking. If you're not used to long distance hiking, suddenly to be walking all day, every day, day after day, your body's not used to it. And so it's pretty common that people might get blisters or aches and pains and things like that. It's kind of part of the experience. If you're worried about blisters, I've got videos about blisters on the channel. But don't be too worried about it. Most people get some sort of niggling injury along the way and you deal with it. The people around you are going to help you. Healthcare professionals in Spain are fantastic. Particularly again on the more popular routes, you'll be coming across health centres and doctors, and wherever you're staying, if you ask the host, am I able to see a doctor, or is there a health centre open? They're going to direct you and look after you. So don't worry about it. I mean, I've had injuries that required me to go and see a physio. Physios in Spain are fantastic and not expensive. I had to take my wife Pat to the doctor a couple of times on our last Camino. The grand doctors were fantastic. It was, totally drama-free. So really don't worry about injury. Be sensible. I'm talking about injury rather than illness. So, things to prevent injury, make sure you're stretching and warming up in the mornings and taking care of yourself like that. So there's a chance you might get injured, but, hey, get over it. You'll manage. Number 8 on the fears. I only came up with 8, but if you've got any more, do comment down below. Food and water. Will I be able to access food and water? Again, talking about the more common routes like the Camino Frances. Look, it's a little bit like a Sunday walk going from cafe to cafe. There is one section on the Camino Frances where I think it's 17 kilometres between sort of water points and villages. Other than that, every few kilometres you're going to come across a village and there'll be a cafe where you can buy food and stuff like that. So you don't need to carry a lot of food with you. Sometimes I'll carry a bread roll and some cheese or something like that, but I actually like stopping at the cafes along the way. So food and water and stuff like that is available on the more popular routes all along the way. And even when you're looking at your guidebook and there's like that 17k stage, which is after Carrion, the first time I walked that, I carried loads and loads of water because it was hot and I was worried about, 17 kilometres before I can get to a water tap or anything. I think 5 or 6 kilometres into it, there was a little caravan pulled up, selling coffees and drinks. You find that a lot. The enterprising locals. I've had that happen on 4 or 5 occasions on the Camino Frances where, it's been a really hot day and I'm on a long stretch and I'm thinking, it's another hour before I get to the village, and I'm getting a bit parched, and you come around the corner and there's a fruit stand or someone selling, cold drinks. So on the more popular routes, you get that a lot. If you were planning a first Camino on a more remote route, like say the Via de la Plata, that's the one I'm hoping to do next, there is more of a need to carry all of your food and water for the whole day. Not every day, but there are stretches where you basically, the next village you come to is going to be at the end of the day. So you've got to carry all your needs, but that tends not to happen on the more popular routes. So there we go, food and water, you're not going to run out. If anything, you're going to eat too much, drink too much, and put weight on. So it is a little bit like a walk in the park on a Sunday, stopping for coffee and cakes all the time, certainly on the more popular ones. So there we go, some of the common fears, and I would say, don't worry about them. One of the sayings that people talk about on the Camino is that people pack their fears, and it's very true. When you're looking at your equipment, I need to pack 2 of these in case one breaks, and I'd better pack this just in case, and that's the kind of mentality that we get when we're planning our first Camino, particularly. Once you get out there and you start walking, all of that just... you drop that thinking and you make do with very little, and you tend not to worry about stuff. It's a very liberating experience. So there we go, just to recap. Do not worry about walking alone, getting lost, clothing, just some good footwear. Don't worry too much about fitness. Get some exercise before you go. Don't worry about personal safety. Just take normal precautions. Don't worry about where to sleep. They've been looking after pilgrims for 1,000 years. It's highly unlikely you're going to end up sleeping under a bush. Don't worry too much about injury. There's lots of help along the way. Just, look after yourself and take precautions for blisters and things like that. And don't worry about food and water, because on most of the really popular routes, there's going to be people, every few kilometres wanting to sell you drinks and food. So pack away those fears. If it's your first Camino, just get out there, walk, have a great deal of fun, and feel that liberating feeling of just spending every day walking through the countryside and the freedom of carrying you home on your back almost. So final things, do a little bit of research, particularly on the route that you're planning to walk, and maybe learn from the experience of others what it's going to be like. Plan, do some rough planning around, this is the amount of time that you've got, therefore maybe this is the route that you're going to walk and how far you're going to walk. Other than that, I plan kind of my daily stages and where I'm going to stop and things like that, purely to work out how many days I need to walk a given route. So, and I walk really slowly. So on the Camino Frances, for example, from Saint-Jean, I'll plan about 40 days. Do I stick to that plan? Do I stay in the villages and towns that I plan to stay in? Generally not. It was just a planning exercise to work out how many days I should allow and kind of what day I might arrive in Santiago. Once you start walking, the plan goes out the window and you can be very flexible. So do a little bit of research, do some rough planning, and then go. And just don't worry. Walk, eat, sleep, repeat. That's what it's all about. So there we go, some of the common fears and things that you really do not need to worry about. Thanks for watching, and see you next week. If you do have any other fears, by all means do comment down below, and I'll answer those, or lots of other people who are watching this video can jump in and answer as well. So good luck planning your first Camino, and maybe I'll see you out there. Bye for now.